Okay, we're going to start the first chelik of the booklet. This is going to focus on the Chiddush Matan Torah of Likkutei Sichos and vatachtonim. The first sikh is a sikh from chelik Tezvav, Pashas Lech Lecha, where the Rebbe explains. So we explained the Akdame that the others through their Aveda were only able to mamshech Lakus down in a spiritual way, and all the mitzvahs that they did were only spiritual, beruchnius. Avraham Avinu was mekayim mitzvahs beruchnius, and Yaakov, we know, like it says in Zohar, put tefillin on to the Avedas Hamaklis, but all that was only beruchnius. And the reason for that is because the reason why the Aveda wasn't able to mamshech Lakus down into Gashmis, because the gather of the definition of kedusha means that it's kadosh muvah, that it's separated from Gashmis. Just like we said, seichel, an intellect is separated from Gashmis, separated from a stone. That is like kedusha and ruchnis, separated from Gashmis. So that's what it means. There was a gzeira between Alionim and Vatachtonim. There was a separation between Elim Saruchnim, spiritual worlds, and Gashmis. So the average to the Aveda will only be able to mamshech Lakus down beruchnis. Achsidus explained that even though that's in general, but the Avos Aveda also had different element. It says Maisa Avos Sim Labanim, that even though we said that the Avedas Avos was different than Matan Torah, on the other hand, the Avos Aveda gave a koyach and gave strength, and they started the Aveda after Matan Torah. And all the Aveda that we have nowadays after Matan Torah all comes because we have the koyach of the Avos, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Which means that in the Avedas Avos itself, we already have a preparation to Matan Torah. And usually in Chassidus and the Rebbe Sichos it brings down, that's why Avraham Avinu, even though his mitzvahs were derech beruchnius, but there was one mitzvah that he did begashmis was the mitzvah of bris milah. Because in order for the Aveda of the Avos to take in his koyach and give strength to the Aveda of after Matan Torah, in the Aveda of the Avos itself had to have an element of having a lakus connected to the gashmis. And that expresses itself by bris milah. And that's why Avraham Avinu told Eliezer, Simna Yad Chatach Zirechi, even though it was a hepech of tznius, because that was the only element of kedusha that penetrated in the Gashmis. So Avraham Avinu wanted Eliezer to make a shur with that. Now the chiddush of Matan Torah wasn't only when it get to mitzvahs, wasn't only that a lakus penetrated the Gashmis. That's one chiddush. Another chiddush of Matan Torah was mechadish, was a chiddush regarding the Aveda of Yidden after Matan Torah. Not only regarding the mitzvahs they do, but after Matan Torah they can affect the physical chayfetz and make it into chayfetz of kedusha. Matan Torah is also machadish, a chiddush in Yid's Aveda, how he serves the Eibishter in Elam Hazeh, and how he looks at a different Yid. That's one of the chiddushim of the sikh, the first sikh in the booklet, that we're not going to focus on the mitzvah of bris milah that Avraham Avinu did to Achanat Matan Torah. We're going to say even more so that his whole Aveda, his whole way he was pearl, he himself acted and was pearl, and other Yidden, was also in a way that he connected the Alionim and vatachtonim. So the Rebbe started the sikh with the sikh of the Rebbe of Vatashim Beis, which is actually the mark of the Ayem, the famous word of the Alter Rebbe, then with the mit the Zeit. Then the Rebbe brings down that the Alter Rebbe came out and he said the Vertel, then the mit the Zeit. And the Chassidim didn't know what it meant, so they asked Maril, and Maril said that the Kavanah of the Alter Rebbe was that we have to live with the Parsha of Shavua, Parshas HaShavua. That besides learning Parshas HaShavua, we have to live with it. And the Rebbe brings a dogma from the three Parshas of Parshas Bereishis, Neach and Lech Lecha. The Parshas Bereishis is in general a happy week, because the Eibishter created the world, and that's why some we read Parshas Bereishis, because it's a happy occasion. But they finishes off with a bad note, that the Eibishter had charata that he created the world, because the people weren't acting properly. Parshas Neach is the other way around. Parshas Neach, the general Parsha, is not a happy Parsha. It speaks about the Mabel. But the end of the Parsha speaks about Avraham Avinu being born, which is a Freiliche subject. As opposed to Parshas Lech Lecha, it's the Emes of Freiliche week, because Parshas Lech Lecha, every single day of the week, we're living with Avraham Avinu. And the Rebbe asks that if Parshas Bereishis is in general a happy week, why did it have to end up in a bad note of the Mabel? Put that in Parshas Neach. And if Parshas Neach is anyway a bad week, why did they end up in a good note with Avraham Avinu being born? Put Avraham Avinu being born in Parshas Lech Lecha. Why are the Parshas divided in a way that each Parsha, the first two Parshas have something bad inside of them, and the third Parsha is all good? So the Rebbe explains that these three Parshas represent three different concepts, three different ways of the world serving the Eibishter. The first parsha, Parshas Bereshis, speaks about the Eibishter creating the world. That represents the Avodah of Alionim. The Avodah of the world being a direct continuation of the Eibishter creating it, which shows on the Eibishter's Kach, which acts the Avodah of Alionim. Parshas Neach is complete opposite. Parshas Neach is the Avodah of Tachtonim. That's when the Parsha speaks about the Mabel, and the point of the Mabel was the Tainus Audits, to purify the world, which means the Tachton working himself and purifying himself. That's the Avodah of Tachtonim. Parshas Lech Lecha speaks about Avraham Avinu, but not time Avraham Avinu, the way Avraham Avinu started preparing for Matan Torah, which that's a chibur of Alionim and Tachtonim, connecting Alionim and Tachtonim. And that's why the Parshas are divided in the way they're divided. Parshas Bereshis speaks about Alionim. So any part of even Noach's life that's shaykh to Alionim, Noach Matzachem Bein Hashem, that's in Parshas Bereshis. Parshas Neach speaks about only Tachtonim, Zichu Chamata. And that's why Avraham Avinu being born was put in Parshas Noach, because that shaykh to Dafka Zichu Chamata that I can explain later. Parshas Lech Lecha speaks about in Avraham Avinu's life itself, the way Avraham Avinu started connecting Alionim and Tachtonim. And that's where the Sichos starts to explain what is the technical connection between the Avodah of Lech Lecha and the Avodah of Achana to Matan Torah of Chibur Alionim and Tachtonim. So in Siv Dal, the Rebbe starts bringing a mashal for these three musagim of Alionim, Tachtonim, and Chibur Alionim and Tachtonim, a mashal of a Rav and Talmud. That when a teacher teaches a student, there could be three ways that a teacher could teach a student. The first way is, which is the most common way a teacher teaches a student, is the teacher teaches the student the subject that he's teaching him. The dogma, if he's teaching him Gemara, he's going to teach the student that the student should understand the Black Gemara. He's not there that the student should understand how to learn Gemara. He's there, the Rav is there to teach the student his understanding, his perspective of what the Gemara is saying, and that the student should understand that. The dogma, a regular Magachir or Rosh Hashiva, so the student has his own capabilities. He understands the Gemara in one way. The Rav understands the Gemara in a much higher way because the Rav is more experienced and much more smarter. So the Rav is mashpia to the student, that the student should get a new perspective of what the Gemara is saying. That's the regular if and the Rav teaches the Talmud. Now the matar of the Shiur, the point of the Shiur, he doesn't have the Talmud should understand by himself, understand how to learn. The Shiur is a chatimsa for the Rav to give over his perspective, his understanding of what the Gemara is saying. Then you have another eifim. That the Rav isn't there to focus on that the student should understand a higher understanding of a Gemara. The Rav wants to teach the student that the student himself should understand and know how to learn himself. So how's he going to do that? He's going to give the student the tools that the student needs to learn Gemara. He's going to tell him the klalim of how to learn Gemara. He's going to give him different questions that the student himself should understand the Gemara. Because his point of teaching isn't that the student should get a different perspective of what the Gemara is saying. He's there that the student should understand with his own keches the Gemara according to his own capabilities. So Ein Chanami is coming from the Rav, meaning without the Rav, the student wouldn't be able to learn by himself anything. But now that the Rav is giving the student the tools to learn Gemara, the student is going to learn the Gemara according to his own capabilities. Now each of these two ways, there's a mile in Chisara. The mile in the first way is that through the student listening to the Shiur that the Rav is teaching him, he's going to get a whole different perspective and a much higher understanding of what the Gemara is trying to say. Because he's not learning the Gemara according to his own capabilities. Adarabba, he's putting his own capabilities aside and understanding the way that Rosh Hashiva or the Magachir, how he understood the Gemara. And that's the whole matar of the Shiur. The matar of the Shiur is not that the student should understand how to learn according to his own capabilities. The matar of the Shiur is that the student should get a higher understanding of the Gemara. On the other hand, it comes with the Chisaron. The Chisaron is that you never actually taught the Talmud that he should understand with his own capabilities how to learn. You never give him the tools to learn. The Talmud, any understanding that he's going to have in the Gemara is only going to come from the Rav. So any Chami, he got a higher understanding of the Gemara. Look at this Seichel that the Rav is teaching, he got a higher understanding of what the Gemara is saying. On the other hand, he never understood with his own Seichel the Gemara. He's understanding a higher perspective of the Gemara. As opposed to the second eifim, when the Rav gives the student the tools to learn, so in Chanami, the student is not going to understand the way the Rav learned the Gemara in his own Seichel. He's going to be much more limited to his own capabilities and his own kishrenis of how he's going to understand the Gemara. but that itself is a Maila. The Maila is that the Talmud is understanding the Gemara. He's actually understanding Gemara with his own capabilities. He's understanding Gemara. It's not the Rav's Gemara. It's his Gemara. It's his understanding. He's understanding Gemara according to what his capabilities give him to understand the Gemara. Now these two ways are a mashal for the Aveda of Alyonim and the Aveda of Tachtenim. The first way, when the Rav teaches the Talmud, the Dvar Seichel, not that the Talmud should understand according to his own capabilities, but more that the Talmud should be elevated and understand the way the Rav learned the Gemara. That represents the Aveda of Alyonim, which is Parshas Bereshis, where he speaks about the Avedas of Tzaddikim from Adam to Noach, that their Aveda wasn't connected to the Aveda B'Koach Atzma. The Aveda was Be'ikir connected to they had the Ashpah M'Mayla, and that kept them going. Like we see by Chanech, it says that even though Chanech was Tzaddik Hoya, but the whole goal for the reason why he was a Tzaddik wasn't because of his own Keiches, was because he was connected to he had Ashpah M'Mayla. And that's why it says regarding Chanech, that if the Eibishter left him hanging around in a bad generation for too long, then he would also join them. Because since his whole connection to Likkutei was because the Likkutei is being married, Likkutei is shining M'Mayla. So the second Likkutei stops shining Begilui because of the generation is not fit for it, so his Aveda will stop. That's the Aveda of Alyonim. The second Eifin of the Rav teaching the Talmud, that the Talmud understands according to his own keiches, because the teacher gave him a derech halimud how the Talmud should understand according to his own capabilities. That represents Parshas Noach, which Parshas Noach is the Aveda of Tachtenim, the 10 tzaddikim from Noach to Avram. Their Aveda wasn't because they had a connection to the Ein Maila, but it was got to do with their own Aveda B'Koach Atzma. And that's why we see that Noach had a effect and had a shaykhis to the world outside of it. Like you see, he tried to get the Mabel to do tshuva, and especially after the Mabel, that the Eibishter made the promise that he's not going to change the Gdarim of the world, which that shows on the shleimus of Avedas Tachtenim, that the Tachtein, that the world is being mezuchach according to the world's capabilities. On the other hand, that comes with the Chisarim. The Chisarim is that if you're speaking about Avedas Tachtenim, in other words, you're speaking about the Aveda of the world being mezachach itself, that the world should connect to Likkutei on the world's terms, in Tachtenim's terms, that comes with a Chisarim that's only able to connect to a limited darga of Likkutei. And that's what it says regarding Noach, and Noach mikatna amonahaya, that his understanding in Likkutei is beikir in things which are shaykh to Seichel Nevrayim, things which are higher than Seichel, which is Emunah. He didn't have a shaykhus to because he didn't have a connection to something which is higher than his mitzvahs. And that's the first two Ifanim, the mashal of Rav and Talmud, and the Rebbe touched today's in the Aveda of Parshas Bereshis, which is Alyonim, and the Aveda of Parshas Noach, which is Tachtenim. Then the Rebbe says that the third Eifin Rav could teach a Talmud, which that's going to represent the Aveda of Avram. The third Eifin that Rav could teach his Talmud is that he teaches him in a way that the Chushya Talmud nasa Chushya Rav. What does it mean Chushya Talmud nasa Chushya Rav? So Chassidus explains that when you have a teacher teaching a student, the effect he could have on him could be in different ways. Like you said before, you can have a teacher affects a student in a way that the student should understand the seichel. You have a teacher affects the student in a way that the student should understand the seichel according to his own capabilities. And then you have a different way, that the teacher changes the way the Talmud thinks. He changes his choshen. Like we see Bapel, that you have different styles of learning. The Fidik ever brings down in Mamarim, that you have, just like you have Chachma bin Das, you have different styles of learning. You have someone who's beikir, someone's able to machadash. Then you have someone, a teacher who's beikir, his specialty is not being machadash, but in explaining. He's able to explain things very well. Then you have another teacher who's able to teach things very deep. He's able to go very deep into the concept he's learning. So these different ways don't have to do with the actual chachma, the actual subject the teacher is teaching. It has to do with the talents the teacher has, the way the teacher thinks. That if the teacher beteva, when he thinks through an Indian, he thinks in an eifin of being machadash. So usually when he's going to teach, he's going to give that over in a way that he's machadash in the seichel that he's teaching. And so too if he's a balas bara, meaning when he in his own seichel, when he thinks about a subject, he explains it and broadens up the subject in his seichel. So that's going to express itself in his teaching. That is, when he teaches, he's going to explain things in a very good way. Now we see that through a teacher teaching a student, through a Rav teaching a Talmud, after a lot of years. So eventually the Talmud starts thinking in the way the teacher thinks himself. And if the teacher's a Balas Bara, the teacher's going to be someone who constantly mavar something, the Talmud himself, his way of thinking, his way of interacting with Seichel is going to be in Eifan Avas Bara. And so if the Talmud, if the Rav is a Amken, the Rav goes very deep. So a student's Signan Alimud, the student's way of learning is also going to be very deep. Until the student's whole way of thinking is going to be in a way that the Rav's thinking. And the ultimate of that is when you say after Aboim Shnin, is Koyim Minish Adaita the Rabbi, that his student, Koyim Minish, the student gets to the Das of the Rav. Now, the mile of this way, of the third way of the Rav teaching a Seichel, on the one hand, the Talmud is understanding with his own Seichel. We're not speaking about elevating the Talmud Seichel, that the Talmud should understand the Seichel, the Talmud should understand the Gemara like the Rav understands Gemara. That's the first difference, that you teach the Talmud, you give the Talmud the Shiur, and the Talmud understands the Shiur. When the Talmud finishes the Shiur, he goes back to his Gemara and learns Gemara the way he learns Gemara. We're not speaking of the second Eifin, that you give the Talmud a way to learn. You tell him the tools how to learn, and the Talmud uses his capabilities to use those tools how to learn the Gemara. Here we're speaking about a connection of two things. On the one hand, the Rav is teaching the Talmud in the style that he learned himself. Like we said before, if he's an Amken, he's going to teach in a deep way. So when he's giving the Seichel over to his Talmud, he's giving an Eifin the way he understands the Seichel. On the other hand, the effect that comes after the Rav teaching the Talmud, we're not speaking about the Talmud understanding of a pearl. We're speaking about the effect that happens after a long time, is that the Talmud's Seichel starts changing. He changes who the Talmud is. And the Talmud starts thinking in a way that the Rav would have thought. So the Talmud starts using his own Seichel to think with his own Seichel. On the other hand, since the Rav changed the way the Talmud thinks, so the Talmud is able to reach the Chidush that the Rav would have came up with. Now the Chiddush of the third Eifin over the first two isn't only a third step. It's a whole different connection between the Rav and the Talmud. In the first two ways, when the Rav is teaching the Talmud, the connection the Rav has to the Talmud is the Dvar Seichel that connects them. The subject that the Rav is teaching, that is what's connecting the Rav and the Talmud. The Rav doesn't have a connection to the Talmud himself. He doesn't have a connection to the Talmud Seichel Mitzadatzmi. Their connection depends on the subject that he's teaching. The third Eifin, there starts becoming a chibur, a connection between the Rav and the Talmud in who they are. That the Rav is changing not only that the Talmud should understand the Seichel, but the Rav is changing the Seichel himself. The Rav is changing the Seichel of the Talmud should think differently. Which means that the Rav and the Talmud are being mischaber together. There's a yichud of the Rav and Talmud. There's a connection of the Rav mitzad atzmei and the Talmud mitzad atzmei. Not only mitzad the Seichel is connecting them, but they themselves are connecting to each other. And that's where the concept of yichud, chibur, Alionim, ותחתונים comes in. That you have a Rav, which is an Alien, you have a Talmud, which is a Tachtin, and the Alien and the Tachtin start being nischaber and joining together. That the Tachtin starts, it itself becomes elevated and starts thinking differently in the Alien Sprach. And that's the mile of Avram, that's the nimshal for David of Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu's Mechadesh had these two sides to him. Mitzad Echad Avram Avinu, like the Rambam says, as soon as Avram Avinu was already small, he started bringing Yirayis, he started bringing proofs from the world how the Eibishter exists. And the Medrash goes and says that Avram Avinu went around the whole world and explained to the whole world how, according to Seichel, according to science, and according to logic, you have to say the Eibishter exists. So Avram Avinu's proof that the Eibishter existed came from Inyan, came from the world, came from Tachtenim. On the other hand, together with Avram Avinu's bringing proof from Inyan Ha'elam, from the concepts of the world that the Eibishter exists, it says regarding Avram Avinu that he was tested with a son in his shenis. He was tested 10 times. And it says regarding Avram Avinu, that that Avraham Avinu already, not even for 1 second, doubted the Eibishter's midas. And like we say in davening, Motzasas Levavi Nemel Lefanacha, that the way Avraham Avinu connected the Eibishter, Motzasas Levavi, he connected the Eibishter in a way of Nemel Lefanacha, with Emunah. So together with the same time that he was kaching in Yana Eilam to prove the Eibishter's existence from Tachtenim, he himself was kaching and connecting the Eibishter in Neifan of Alien. And the reason for that is because Avraham Avinu was already a chanet Matan Torah of Chibur Leinim Tachtenim, connecting El Musalenim Tachtenim. Adkaz is the Sichot Sivav. We'll just stop on a small nekuda. L'cheda, this whole mashal, the concept of the Chibur Leinim Tachtenim, the concept of connection, a connection between Leinim Tachtenim, is brought down in Chassidus Barichis in a lot of different places. And we don't find that Chassidus brings a mashal of 3 ways that Rav could teach us Talmud. What's the mashal meisif in the Havana of Chibur Leinim Tachtenim? Why is the Rebbe mighty so much, bringing a mashal for the inyan of Chibur Leinim Tachtenim? The Cheder is Pashat. You have the Aveda of Alionim, Aveda of Tachtenim, and then you have a Chibur of Alionim Tachtenim, which happened bigger after Matan Torah. And like we see this regarding mitzvahs for Pe'el, the after Matan Torah, we see that a gashim that mitzvahs becomes holy. Why do we need a whole mashal to explain this concept? So the Cheder is Shleimad, that over here the Rebbe is not only coming to explain the concept of Chibur Leinim Tachtenim. That's a concept that brought in Chassidus a few times. And the Taka doesn't need a mashal. Over here the Rebbe starts it down with the question. The question was, what is the chiluk between Parshas Bereishis and Parshas Neach? Because l'chayra we find, even in Parshas Bereishis, which represents the Aved of Alionim, we still find that in Parshas Bereishis there were tzaddikim who worked with Tachtenim. You had 10 tzaddikim from Adam and Neach, and they were in Elam Hazeh. What was their job? Their job was to mamshech halakos lamata. So Parshas Bereishis isn't Alionim. Parshas Bereishis, in Parshas Bereishis Gufa, includes a bit of tzaddikim in Elam Hazeh. So l'chera, once you have a metzias of the Eibishter creating the world, once you have a metzias of the Eibishter creating a tzaddik in Elam Hazeh, that l'chomela's aveda is Chibur Leinim Tachtenim. That a tzaddik working with Tachtenim is doesn't matter what darga of tzaddik he is already a Chibur Leinim Tachtenim. So what was the chiddush of Avraham Avinu? Avraham Avinu started Chibur Leinim Tachtenim. Any tzaddik is Chibur Leinim Tachtenim, because the tzaddik is working in Elam Hazeh. So how can we say the Parshas Bereishis is only Alionim? How can we say the Parshas Bereishis represents Aved of Alionim? Afal pi hazeh dan is given Aved Tachtenim durch kam tzaddikim. Even in Parshas Bereishis we have the Aveda of tzaddikim, which represent the Aved of Tachtenim. So what does it mean that you have the Parshas Bereishis is the Aved of Alionim? What's the difference between the Avedas of tzaddikim in Parshas Bereishis of Alionim to Parshas Nech, which represents Tachtenim? And that's what the Rebbe is going to go mashal for. The mashal is going to explain how in a chibur of Elyon and Tachten Gufe, you can have 3 ways. The mashal that Rebbe brings is from Rav and Talmud. Now the chiddush of a mashal of Rav and Talmud is because the chiddush explains there's 3 types of connection between people. You have a connection chitzeni, a kasher chitzeni. Dogma, when a rich man, a usher, gives money to a poor man. So with that, the kasher, then they're not bad to connected to each other. They have a common denominator that connects them is money. Money is the chitzeni is the good thing. It's like a maisa. It's a maisa connection. So the kasher is based on maisa, which is called the kasher chitzeni. In other words, Reuven isn't connecting to who Shimon is and doesn't have any effect on Shimon. The only effect he has on him is in his chitzenius. He gives chitzenius money, and that affects Shimon's chitzenius. Shimon's parnas. Then you have a different type of connection, which is a kasher atzmi. A kasher atzmi is a dogma, a connection between a father and a son. When a father connects to his son, he's not connecting to chitzenius, the part of the son. He's connecting to who the son is. The son is his etzem, and therefore he's connecting to his etzem. So, in the dogma namashal of Asher and Ani, that's not a connection of Elyon and Tachten. The Chatchil over there's no connection. The dogma of a father and a son, there's no kasher of Elyon and Tachten either, because the son is the Metzias of the father. It's all Elyon. A third type of connection is the kesher between a Rav and a Talmud. A Rav and a Talmud is called a kesher primi. It's a primistic connection. Why? Because seichel is l'chatchil the primus of a person, as opposed to mice of a person, which is the chesenis of a person. Seichel is the primus of a person. And when a person understands someone else's seichel, he's understanding his primus. And that affects the primus of the person. Like it says in Tanya, that when you learn Torah, that's the biggest yichud you have with the Eibishter. Because that our seichel should surround the Eibishter's chachma, and the maskal and the muskal should be connected to each other. That's the biggest type of connection you can have. So Ba'atzim, if you want to bring a dogma of Rav and Talmud, that's the true dogma you can bring for Alien and Tachton. The Rav is an Alien, and the Talmud is a Tachton. And the Rav is going to be mechaber with the highest type of connection that an Alien and Tachton can have, which is through Seichel. So any connection with Rav and Talmud is already Chibur Aleinu Vatachtonim. The Rav is an Alien, the Talmud is a Tachton. And the fact that the Talmud, whichever way that Rav teaches him, the fact that Talmud is understanding it, means it's a Chibur of Alien and Tachton over. And that's what the Rebbe brings the dogma from Rav and Talmud, that in that connection, go for this three dargis. Meaning in the Chibur of Alien and Tachton itself, there's three ways of them connecting to each other. You have a way that the Alien connects to the Tachton, that even though there's a connection over there, what's mudgush, what's stressed, is the connection of the Alien, of the Rav. The Rav teaching the Talmud should understand the Rav Tzeichel. Then you have a Chibur of Alien and a Tachton, that even though they're connecting to each other, but what's emphasized is the Tachton, to give the Talmud derech halimud. And then you have a third oifen, and that's the true connection of Chibur Alien and Tachton, that you change the Tachton, he should become part of the Alien. On the other hand, he stays the Tachton because it's his Seichel. And that's how the Rebbe answered the Shiur that Rebbe started in Sivdal. The Shiur was, what's the difference between the Tzaddikim and Parshas Bereishis and Parshas Noach? Even in Parshas Bereishis you have Aveda Vatachton. And the answer is that even though in Parshas Bereishis you have Aveda Vatachton, even though in Parshas Bereishis you have already a Metzias of a Tzaddik, which is a Tachton, working in Elam Hazah, to be Mamshech HaLakos, but that's all, but that's all, what's emphasized over there, what's mudgish, it's mudgish Avedas Alyonim. Just like in the first mashal of the Rav and Talmud, that the Rav teaches the Talmud, even though the Talmud is understanding the Rav Seichel, so there is a connection between Alyon and Tachton. But what's emphasized over there? The Seichel Rav. So the Aveda of the Tzaddikim from Adam until Noach, Enechanami there was Avedas Tachton. Enechanami they worked in Elam Hazah. But their Aveda Guf of working in Elam Hazah itself was emphasized, not a Chibur of Alyon and Tachton that they joined together equally, but that their connection of the Chibur Alyon and Tachton should be emphasized only Avedas Alyon, as opposed to Parshas Noach Mufakir. That is Taka a Chibur of Alyon and Tachton. It's Taka a Inyan of Noach, Taka serving the Eibishter in Elam Hazah. But what is emphasized by Noach's Aveda? Not so much the Emunah Shebazeh, and not so much the Chibur of the Alyon to the Tachton, but more the Avedas Tachton. The Chiddush of Avraham Avinu's Aveda and of Matan Torah is that the Alyon and Tachton should connect equally. The Alyon and Tachton should have a primistic connection with each other. That is not mudgish that in two mitziasim, that they become one mitzias, they become one entity. It's interesting on the topic of Chusha Tam Nasa Chusha Rav. So in the later years, the answers of the Rebbe became much more general, much more short. And someone had a question on health. The Rebbe said, could ask her if you did. And the Rebbe would answer, you didn't mevinim. And the Rebbe was in this a few times. And people complain that the Rebbe is not giving specific answers. So the Rebbe said, number one, you have to ask Mashpia, and the answer is going to come through him. And another concept the Rebbe said was that after years of the Rebbe giving Nam Keiches, Fidik Rebbe and the Rebbe giving Nam Keiches in the Chassidim, Chosha Tam Nasa Chosha Rav, meaning the Chassidim where I have the Keich to start thinking, I mean, Mechavim to the Kavanah the Rebbe have answered. So that's all the Aveda of Avraham Avinu. And see if the Rebbe starts explaining why the Aveda of Avraham Avinu was only a chana to Matan Torah and wasn't the union of Chibur, Lenim, ותחתונים itself. And the reason for that is because just like in the Mashal of Rav and Talmud, that which the Rav teaches the Talmud, he has to teach Dafka someone who has a shaykhus to Seichel. In other words, you can't say that the Talmud is a real tachtin. You can't say that the Talmud is a real tachtin, that the Elyon, the Rav, is connecting to the tachtin on his level. Why? Because there's some sort of erech, there's some sort of connection between the Rav and Talmud before he starts teaching them. Which that connection is that the Talmud has Seichel. The Rav can't teach a stone. He can't teach someone that doesn't have a shaykhus to Seichel. A Talmud has a shaykhus to Seichel, the Rav could teach him. In the Chama, the Rav is higher than him. In this aspect, the Rav is taka Alyon, he's taka higher than the Talmud. But they share something in common, that they both have Seichel. So even if you're going to tell me that Chushya Talmud Nasa Chushya Rav, at the end of the day, the Chushim of the Talmud is not a Tachtin. And the Chanami, he changed the Seichel to a higher type of Seichel, but there's no connection between an Alyon and a Tachtin who's Be'ein Areich to the Alyon. Why? Because the Talmud has a shaykhus to Seichel. And like his brother in Chassidus, the difference between Eira and Shefa, that Shefa can only come to something which is a kli for it. Seichel can only come and resonate in something which is a kli for Seichel. Like his brother in Chassidus, someone doesn't have a head, is the concept of Seichel doesn't relate to him. Just like the Rav can't teach a stone, because the stone doesn't have a shaykhus to Seichel. When the Rav teaches someone, he has to teach someone who has a shaykhus, some sort of erech to him. So that's the one point why the Rav, in the Rav is an Elyon, but he's not reaching a tachtin. And even more so, in the connection of Chibur, Aleinu, ותחתונים, in this connection when they do connect to each other, the point of the Rav is there to change the Talmud Seichel. Chosha Talmud Nasa Chosha Rav, he elevates the Talmud Seichel, that they should become like his Seichel. So even though, on the one hand, like we explained before, this is a chibur, this is a connection between an alyon and a tachtin. On the other hand, the connection happens that the alyon picks up the tachtin and changes it. And if you're going to ask the Talmud that mitzad your seichel, would you have come up with this svara? He'll say no. The reason why, he himself agrees, the reason why he speaks this language and he thinks this way is because the Rav changed his seichel, how he thinks. But the level of tachtonim, like they're by themselves, the level of the Talmud Seichel, before the Rav taught him, never got elevated. And these two reasons are totally zebuzah. These two reasons are connected to each other. That which the Rav can only reach the Talmud, who has a shaykhus to Seichel, is because the Rav's hashpah is limited into the tzir of Seichel. He's limited to something which has a connection to him. And therefore, he's not able to reach a level that doesn't relate to him, that doesn't connect him. So that's why number one is only able to relate to a Talmud as a shaykhus to Seichel. And in that itself, the only thing he's able to do is to elevate the Talmud Seichel, the Talmud Seichel should become like his. So in the Rav Seichel is an Elyon, and he's bli gvul. But he's limited to having a connection to something which relates to him. And therefore he can only reach Seichel. And in Seichel itself, he's only able to change Seichel. But he can't relate to Seichel that doesn't have a connection to him. As opposed to Matan Torah doesn't have these two chistenis. Because number one, Matan Torah, Likkutei came down to Elam Hazeh, Vayed Avay Elai Sinai. And like you said before, that the gather of Gashmis and Nuchnis aren't be'ein arech to each other, they're hepech each other. They both bring out two completely separate entities. So it's not that Likkutei came down to a lower level that didn't have a shaykhus to Likkutei in a revealed way. A Likkutei came down and connected to a tachtin that had no connection to Likkutei whatsoever. Unlike the Moshe of Rav and Talmud, that the Rav teaches only a Talmud that is shaykhus to Seichel. As opposed to Matan Torah, Likkutei connected and was nischaber to Metzias that not only doesn't bring out Likkutei, but it's hepech of Likkutei. And how's that possible? And mitzad bli gvul, and mitzad a darga of Likkutei, which is mugbal to being higher than Eilam Meis, it's not shaykh. But mitzad the Eibishter is called Yochel. And nimna nimnois, the Eibishter is able to connect two opposite things that happen at the same time. So Likkutei was able to come down into a tachtin, something which has no connection to Likkutei whatsoever, and together with that being nischaber with Alionim. And that also brings out the second prat, that now that Lakus does connect to tachtenim, he's not elevating tachtenim that they should change. He's relating to the tachten on the tachten's level, that the tachten himself should have a connection to Lakus. Not that he should be elevated to Lakus, is that he should be connected to Lakus on his level. Like we're going to explain what that means soon. And the reason for that is because the dagger of Giloim, the dagger which is there to be Magala Lakus, he's only able to connect to Metzias that brings out Lakus. And therefore, if that Metzias doesn't bring out Lakus in his way, he's going to elevate it, so they should bring out Lakus. We're shaking a dagger of Atmos, or a dagger which is not there to bring out a Lakus in a revealed way. He's just there because that's the essence of the Eibishter. So he's able to come into the Metzias, into any Metzias, not only Metzias that is Megala is present, but even something which is a Tachten is able to connect to that also. And that comes together with not elevating the Tachten, but the Tachten staying on his level, and on his level he's connected to Lakus. And that's a Chidush Matan Torah over Avraham Avinu. Now to explain this concept a bit more, the Rebbe brings down in hour 40 that L'chayra, what happened Matan Torah? Matan Torah, the world didn't become a kli for a Lakus. The world didn't connect to Lakus as a Tachten. What happened Matan Torah was the opposite. There was Amshachim el Maila. And now that happened, the world wasn't a kli for it. The world stopped. Like it said, Tzipur Leitzavach, and then you had Parchim Nishmasam. But Matan Torah was only Amshachim el Maila Lamata. And now that happened, it was Mevatel the Gdarim of a Tachten. Adarach, the first mashal we had before, of a Rav teaching his Talmud, not that the Talmud should understand according to his level, but that he should be elevated and connected to the Seich of the Rav. So how does that fit? We're saying in the Prim, Matan Torah was a chibur of Leinim Tachtenim. So the Rebbe answers number one, that Matan Torah gave a koyach for the Avei David and after Matan Torah. That how good for that which he's been able to make the world a Metzias of a Lakus, and able to make the world a Kli for the Eibishter's presence to attain mitzvahs. That all comes as a tzitza of the Nesinas Keach, and the Eibishter gave Matan Torah. So even though B'Peil, Matan Torah only started in Umayla Lamata, but that gave a Keach for the Aveda, the Indian can make the world a Metzias of a Lakus. Like we're going to see in the next Sikha, Barichas. So that which Yidden are making the world a Kli for a Lakus, that's the Indian of Chibur Aleinu Mitachtein. Why? Because, like his brother in Chassidus, that when Yidden do Aveda and Al-Mahaza and refine the world and make the world a Kli for Lakus, the world now has a shaykh is not only to the Dag of Lakus that shaykh to Elamis, but also to the Dag of Lakus which is L'mayla M'shaykh's to Elamis. L'chayna, if the problem of the world is that's Elam Melashim Helm V'astim, and it's not able to dare Lakus, so through a Yid doing Tenem Mitzvahs, bringing Lakus to the world, it refines the world. And now the world should have a shaykh to Lakus. But which Dag of Lakus should the world have shaykhs to? A Dag of Lakus which is ready to the shaykhs to the world. That which the world can't accept a Lakus is the world is Elam Lashon Helm V'astim. So when you get rid of the Helm, it's able to receive a Dag of Lakus, it's able to realize that his Metzias is a Lakus. But why through a Yid doing mitzvahs and making the world a Kli for a Lakus, suddenly now the world has a shaykhs to a Lakus L'mayla M'shaykhs L'Elamis, higher than the Metzias of the world. Now that comes from Matan Torah. Matan Torah is Mechadish that once you make the world a Kli for a Lakus, it should also be shaykh to Alionim. It should also be shaykh to Dag of a Lakus which is completely higher than the Metzias of the world. And that should connect to the world out to Tachten. To Metzias that Be'etzem only has a shaykhs to Lakus which is shaykh to Elamis. Now you should be able to not only connect to that, but he can connect to something higher than his Metzias. And that's why Matan Torah was a chibur Leinim Tachtein. Then the Rebbe goes further in the order. The shleimus of that would be L'asad Lavi. What's going to happen in L'asad Lavi? L'asad Lavi, the world is going to be a Dira B'Tachtein, a Dira for the Eibishter. Which means that the world is going to be a Kli for Atzmutzi Yisbarich. Meaning it's not that the world is going to elevate and stop being a Gashmi. The world is going to be a Gashmi. But together with the world being a Gashmi, that Gashmi is going to be a Kli for Atzmutzi Yisbarich. And this brings itself out by L'asad Lavi. When it says V'rol Kol Basar, it says that the physical flesh will be able to derher Lakus according to his own Gdarim, according to his own definitions. Just like right now, the body in the world relates to Gashmis, Why? Because since the world is a gashmi, so what's munach by the world and what's pshitis by the world is gashmi. La'asalave is going to be punkt verkehrt. That the gashmi, the basar, is going to derher the ruchni is an eifan of pshitis. Adarach, when a person sees something, it becomes clear by him that no one could frag it up. La'asalave v'ro kol basar, that the gashmi is the basar will be able to see a lakus. Which means the lakus is going to be such a clear mitzvah that the world, the way it is, they're going to be able to grasp it. So it's not said that the gashmi is going to stop being a gashmi. The gashmi is going to see a lakus. Because that's the lachibur of Elyon and Tachton. That the Elyon comes into the Tachton, and in the Tachton's Gdarim, the Tachton connects to the Elyon Kameshu. Well, the gather of the world is that his Elam Lashon Halam Vaster. The gather of Tachtenim means that he doesn't have a connection to Lakus. So the second you tell me that you have a Tachten that does have a connection to Lakus, that means that you elevated the Tachten. You broke the Gdarim of a Tachten, you broke the definition of a Tachten. And that Tachten has a Shaykh to Lakus, he's not a Tachten anymore. And in Pashas, when we say the Eibush is going to have Dir Tachtenim, it means that the Eibush is going to dwell in the world, and the world is going to stop being a Tachten. Enochanami is going to connect to the world as a Tachten. It's still going to be a Gashmi. But he's going to change the definition of Gashmis. So how does that fit what we're saying over here? That Chibur Aleinim Tachtenim, the true Chibur, means that the Tachten stays a Tachten, and while him staying a Tachten, he connects to the Elyon. Or in other words, that the world stays a Tachten, and together with that is a Dirib Tachtenim. If he becomes a Dirib Tachtenim, he's not a Tachten anymore. So this question that I've asked a few times in the Likkutei Sichos and the others, and there's mainly two answers to the question. The main answer to this question is in Likkutei Sichos Hilukut Beis, Parshat Tazria, and second Sicha are 30. Which over there, the Sicha, we have this, the Sicha of Dirib Tachtenim, the Rebbe goes through the Chiddush of Dirib Tachtenim. And the Rebbe says that in Echanami, for a Gashmi to connect to Lakus, for a Yesh to connect to Lakus, there is no other way for a Yesh to connect to Lakus unless the Eibush changes the Gdarim of the Yesh. In other words, the only way for a Yesh to connect to Lakus on his level is only if the Eibush is Magala, how the Yesh itself is a Lakus. Or in the Lashon of Chassidus, the La'as Alavu bin Nizgala, the Metzias HaYesh is the Metzias of Yesh HaAmiti. So l'chayr, if you do that, if you be Magala, how the Yesh HaNivra is the Yesh HaAmiti, so you change the Ged of the Yesh HaNivra. The Ged of the Yesh HaNivra is that he feels the Yesh HaNivra. And he feels the separate Metzias of the Eibush. The second you tell me that now you're Magala on him, how he is Betzim HaLakos, so he's not a Tachton anymore. In other words, if the whole word of the Dirib Tachtenim is the Magala Dargav HaLakos that's able to come down even to a Tachton, so he has to stay a Tachton. The second you change him, there's no Chiddush in that. So the Rebbe answers that Rebbe just brought on a Chassidus, that La'as Alavu Magala, how the Yesh HaNivra is the Yesh HaAmiti, it doesn't mean that a Nivra will stop being a Nivra. The Chiddush is that the Yesh HaNivra, when he's a Yesh HaNivra, he himself will inherit the Yesh HaAmiti. In other words, the Chiddush is, in Agma Magala HaLachatchil, there was no Yesh HaNivra. That's not the word. The word is that the Yesh HaNivra is going to understand, according to his Seichel, that the reason why he's a Yesh HaNivra is only to bring out the Metzias Yesh HaAmiti. The way the Nivra was created, mitzad his Gedder, if you're going to ask a Nivra what he is, he's a Nivra. And a Nivra comes with the Elam Lashon Halam Vaster. A Nivra means he's not connected to the Eibush. Even if you're going to tell the Nivra and be Magala how the Nivra itself is the Lakus, the Nivra, part of his definition, is going to understand that it's something which is higher than his being. In Echanami, you can Magala how you Be'etzim Shaykh to Lakus. But that's how Be'etzim is Shaykh to Lakus. In its Giloyim, in other words, the Yesh HaNivra, the way he's created as an entity that doesn't feel Lakus. Even if you're going to tell him that his Amos and Metzias is a Lakus, but that doesn't resonate to his Giloyim. That doesn't connect to who he is. Because a Nivra, by definition, is a Metzias that doesn't inherit Lakus. And to tell me that from a Metzias that doesn't inherit Lakus, that should bring out the highest levels of a Lakus, that's a Taita Desasi. That's a Stiri Minei Obey. And if you're going to make that happen, it's only Mitzad Kol Yochel. It's only Mitzad Atzmos. Atzmos Kataka make that from a Metzias that is there to bring out a Niva Afsiyed, from that Metzias, it should bring out that the whole Tnu of a Niva Afsiyed is only to bring out the Eibishter. But that's all from Atzmos. Mitzad the definition of the Nivra, the way it's Mitzad Giloyim. he's never going to be able to understand such a concept. In other words, Lasalave, Mitzad Echad, you're not going to actually be able to understand the Likkutei in a way that's pushed by them. Something which is just like it's Gashmish is the true Metzias. So Likkutei is also going to be a true Metzias. And that's Taka going to be a true Metzias. They're going to their head, but Taka going to see a Likkutei. On the other hand, together with that, there's still going to be a Tnuah that the Nivra is going to understand that whatever he sees and whatever he does with a Shaykhis to, it's all a Davan Nesav on his gather. It's all a Davan Nesav on his definition. Because his definition is that he's not supposed to have a Shaykhis to Likkutei in such a way. And if he does have a Shaykhis to Likkutei in such a way, it's all something which is going to be a Davan Nesav on him. It's never going to be able to resonate in his Giluyim that he's a Likkutei. So that's a beer that has a Chilikut base. The Rebbe is mitzayin to the end of the Ara, the end of the Shula Agilion of Ara 40. The Rebbe is mitzayin to that Sikh. In Al Sikh, the Rebbe explains the same Teichen, but the way it works Lamaila. This question that a Nivra by definition doesn't understand the Likkutei, and the Asalav he will understand the Likkutei, isn't only a Shaila b'Pel b'Gashmis. It's also a Shaila the way the Eibishter created the world Lamaila. It's the concept of Tzimtzum. How Gufa. The reason why a Nivra doesn't understand the Likkutei is because the way the Eibishter created the world was through Tzimtzum. Like it says in Kabbalah, that before the Eibishter created the world, in order to create the world, the Eibishter had to be Silik Yisrael, the Eibishter had to be Masalik there to make it Tzimtzum. The Tnuah of Tzimtzum means that the Eibishter is concealing himself. So if you have a Nivra that comes after Tzimtzum, since the whole point of Tzimtzum is that the Eibishter concealed himself, so the definition of the Nivra is that his definition is that he doesn't see a Likkutei. So Pashtus, in order for the Eibishter to make that a Nivra should that hear a Likkutei. In other words, in order for the Eibishter to change the definition of a Nivra, what did the Eibishter have to do? The Eibishter has to get rid of the Tzimtzum. The Eibishter has to get rid of the concept of Halam and make it like before Tzimtzum. Just like before Tzimtzum, a Likkutei was beginning. So till the Eibishter, when Mashiach comes, the Eibishter could take away the Tzimtzum, so that it can be made. But it's brought on a Chassidus, so the Eibishter is not going to do that. The way the Eibishter is going to be Megala, the Eira Bligvul Asa Loving, isn't by getting rid of the Tzimtzum. The Eibishter is going to make that the Tzimtzum itself should shine. Like the Lashon Chassidus is, Tzimtzum Atzmei Yafich Le'er. The Eibishter is not going to get rid of the Tzimtzum. The Eibishter is going to make that the Tzimtzum itself should change into Eir. Now this concept of Tzimtzum itself, of Cheshech itself, changing into Eir, or Laila Kayom Yoy, this concept doesn't fit with the definition of Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum by definition is that it can't shine. Cheshech, darkness by definition is that it's not light. The second you tell me that Cheshech is able to shine, not that you bring a light that's mevatel the Cheshech, that the Cheshech itself should become light, means that you're going against the Gdarim of Eir and Cheshech. Eir by definition is supposed to light, and darkness by definition is supposed to be dark. If you tell me that the Cheshech is able to shine, you're going against the definition of Cheshech. And the only way for that to happen is Mitzad Kovetz's Atzmos. The Kovetz's Atzmos is Cheshech and Eir are the same Metzias. And he's able to make that in Cheshech itself is able to shine. But on the other hand, since the Cheshech is able to shine, or since the Tzimtzum is able to shine, is only Kovetz's Atzmos, it's not that the Eibishter got rid of the definition of Tzimtzum. The Eibishter changed that the definition of Tzimtzum itself should become Eir. The Tzimtzum or Cheshech, he understands every single second that he's shining not mitzad his definition. He's shining mitzad the Atzmos made that he should be that way. But mitzad his own specific definition, he stayed the way he was. He doesn't understand the change that happened to him. He doesn't deher the change that happened to him. And that's why it's going to express itself in a Nivra the same way. A Nivra is going to understand the Likkutei and Be'efna Pashut. But on the other hand, the Nivra is going to feel, the Tachton is going to feel, that any Shaykhas he has to Likkutei, even if it's the highest understanding of the Likkutei and Be'efna Pashut, at the end of the day, that's not the definition of a Nivra. The definition of a Nivra is that he doesn't have a connection to Likkutei. And any connection he does have to Likkutei is only mitzvah Kovetz's Atzmos. So Kovetz's Atzmos doesn't resonate in the Geluim of a person. The Geluim of a person, the definition stays the same. If someone's going to see something, it doesn't make sense. Let's say someone sees a metzias of a flying elephant. So he saw it, and that's the fact. But at the end of the day, he understands that this fact isn't able to come down into his Kovetz's Giluim. He's not able to understand it, and he's not able to feel it. He saw it because it was shown to him. But can you say that changed his definition? Can you say that changed him? That didn't change him. His seichel still can't understand why elephant could fly. On the other hand, seichel tov is machriach that he saw it. And since he saw it, it has to be true. So mitzat seichel, he still doesn't have a shaykhus to this inyan. On the other hand, mitzad de'iyah, or mitzad is muhus, he does have a shaykhus to the inyan because he saw it. Adarach zeh, when Lasa love it, mitzad the niv is going to have a connection to lakus in the highest way. They're going to be able to see a lakus and feel a lakus, just like a person feels gashmi now. On the other hand, there's still going to be a tnu of a nivra being a nivra. There's still going to be a tnu of a tachtin being a tachtin. Why? Because any connection that the tachtin is going to have to lakus, he's going to understand that it's not supposed to be that way. It's only because the Eibishter made it that way. Regarding this concept of tzimtzum atzmi yoy, that cheshach turning into eir, and still staying together of cheshach, there's a maimer of Vavaya Amar Machase. The Manichim wrote this word in one of the artists of the maimer. And when the Rebbe was Megia the maimer, the Rebbe wrote, Ashri chalkom sheposhet etzlam havonas tzimtzum nasa eir, af shenisha tzimtzum. Meaning the Rebbe was saying, praiseworthy of them, the Lashon Saginor, that praise of the people who can understand such a thing. And on the Shabbos Shabregner after that week, the week that Rebbe was Megia the maimer, so the Rebbe said that there's certain concepts of Chassidus that everyone speaks about them. We make as if it's a Davar HaPashut, but be'etzem they're not understandable. The dogma, the concept of Tzimtzum itself turning into Eir. Regarding Cheshach turning into Eir, you could say that since the discussion with the Cheshach is a Metzias, or Cheshach is only Heder, it's Cheshach an entity, or Cheshach is only something when there's no Eir that are Chamel Cheshach. So if you say Cheshach is a Metzias, you could say the last level, they wish to change the Metzias of Cheshach, that it should be Eir. But regarding Tzimtzum, the concept of Tzimtzum is Heder. It means that there's no Gilui Eir. There's no Metzias of Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means the Eibush does not Meir. So how can you say that Lasalave, through the Tzimtzum itself be Meir? The second it's Meir, it's not Tzimtzum anymore. And now you're going to say that that's what it says in Chassidus. So the Rebbe said, just like what it says in Chassidus is Emes, you also have to be Emes with yourself and say that you don't understand. That's how the Rebbe finished up the Sikha. Akapanim, even though we don't understand what it means that the Tzimtzum itself is going to be Meir, but the Nekuda is that whatever it means is that it's not something which is supposed to be Mitzad Giluim. It's not something that's supposed to make sense. And every single second that it happens, it doesn't make sense be'etzem. And therefore, Mitzad Echad, it's happening. Mitzad Echad was saying that since that the Rasa Lavi, the world's going to be have a Shaykhs to Lakos, and it's going to be Nizgal of the Mitzvah, so Yasha Nivra is Bames from Mitzvah of Yasha Amiti. And that comes Mitzad, that Tzimtzum itself changes it's gather. So that's going to happen. But Mitzad Sheni, how Gufa, that it's part of his gather, is not something that resonates, that starts from him. It's something that came in Maila, that the Eibishter's Koyach is able to make that even a Metzias that's supposed to be, according to the Gedarim that the Eibishter itself created, it's supposed to be a Yesh, and it's supposed to be a Metzias that doesn't have Shaykhs to Lakos. Even he, Mitzad Koyachal, his Inyan could also become a Lakos. But that's all Mitzad Koyachal. The second, the Koyach of Koyachal is not there, the Nivra stays the way he is. If you bring a dogma for this to something that exists in Al-Mahazah already, in Lech Lecha Chelikei, the Rebbe goes through and explains what's chat that we find Nivram, we find creations that are Nitchi. It says regarding Tzva Shamayim, the sun and the moon and the planets, that they're here, the Kayam Be'ish. Their physical existence has been here since Sheshus Bnei Bereshis. And even more so, the way they're here is that they don't get weaker. Like it says in Yerushalmi, like Chazakim B'yemi Baram, they're the same stronger they were created. Now, what does it mean that you have a nivra, you have a creation that's nitzchi? What does it mean you have a creation that's everlasting? A creation by definition, a nivra by definition is mugbal. If the definition of a nivra is mugbal, then there has to be an end to his existence, or there has to be a weakness in his existence. How can you have a nivra, a physical being, that Chazakim B'yemi Baram? So it's broader than Chassidus. The average sun and the moon, Achazak and Yemi Baram, is not mitzad their own mitzvah. It's mitzad the Kehach Seif that comes into them. And the Eibishter made a mitzvah, a physical mitzvah. That physical mitzvah should have a Kehach Seif, Mumayla. So Pashtas, every single second that the sun is as strong as it was created, doesn't relate to the sun's mitzvah by itself. It's only because he has a Kehach, an everlasting Kehach inside of him. Adarach, someone could take a stone and they have a Kehach Hablik and throw the stone. The stone's going to go forever. On the other hand, it's brought in Chassidus that this Kehchein Seif that does mechaya them, even though their gvul and the Kehchein Seif is bli gvul, but it affects them in the way that their whole metzius becomes bli gvul. And so much so that which lost love, they're going to change their metzius, is going to come only mitzad ratzon habed because they should have decided that. But mitzad their own being, they become nitzchi. So we have two things going on at the same time over here. Mitzad achar, we're saying that the son is a physical mitzvah, and therefore he has to be mugbal, he has to be limited. Mitzad sheni, we're saying that the Eibishter put in this physical mitzvah a keach habligval, unlimited keach, and that's why it's chazak and kemi bottom. Even more so, this keach that goes into them is mishachas to them. It becomes part of their entity. The tzva shomayim are higher than tzva aretz, because the keach that goes into them becomes one with their mitzvahs. So they become bligvul. And if la'asa lavi, when the Eibishter is going to shvachen them up, it's going to have to be b'ratzon habed. On the other hand, the sun and moon stay in mitzvahs gashmis. The sun and moon know that how good for that which their own mitzvahs became bligvul is only mitzad keach habed. So mitzad echad, it does become their mitzvahs, and it does connect to them who they are. Mitzad shein, at the end of the day, the whole gufa that it does connect to them mitzvahs is only mitzad keach, only in a higher type of keach. So there's a lot of love. Mitzad echad ein nechanami. That the Eibishter is going to megalach the mitzvahs hayesh he himself zelakus. The mitzvahs hayesh anivra is the mitzvahs hayesh amiti. Mitzad sheini, whole gufa that a nivra in the same time of being a nivra could be megalach he's the mitzvahs hayesh amiti doesn't fit in the gdar of a nivra. That doesn't work in the gdar of a nivra. And therefore, the nivra is going to stay a tachtin, but a type of tachtin that the Eibishter decided this tachtin should have a primitive connection to lakos in a way that becomes his mitzvahs. In Siv Zayin, the Rebbe teaches these four ways of lchiבור and tachtin. You need avodah. You have a way a yid could serve the Eibishter, and even of Alionim. What does that mean? Is avodah is only mitzvah the neshama and doesn't have a connection to his guf. And then the Rebbe adds in brackets, even though when he does have a connection to his guf, it's not to be pearl on the guf, but it's because the only way for him to be mekayim Torah mitzvahs is only through the guf. So the guf is the intermediate for the avodah and neshama to be mekayim Torah mitzvahs. There was a mitzayin in R41 to Bas Lagan and Tashin Yud Beis. The Rebbe says over there, you have yidden who learn Torah and do mitzvahs. In other words, when they go to shul, or when they're learning the betachas elokait, because the neshama is pearl on the guf, the neshama is pearl on the body, that since it's the time the neshama should shine, so therefore the body, the rechamel is vedel. But then when they go out of shul, and they go into business, and they stop with the avodas and neshama, so the guf has no shaykhs to lakos. It's not nikar on the guf that the guf was a guf that a person davened with that morning. Why? Because avodas together with the guf wasn't to be pearl on the guf as a mitzvah by itself. The whole avodah with the guf was only a intermediate that should bring out the avodas and neshama, and therefore it doesn't have an effect on the guf as a separate mitzvah. The second, that the neshama stops shining, so the guf has no shaykhs to lakos. That's the avodah of Alionim. Then the Rebbe says you have another type of avodah, which is avodah tachtenim. Avodah tachtenim means that Itaka does work with his guf, and even more so, he works with the world. He starts being put on the world of the tachtenim. But on the other hand, he doesn't care about the kavanah enough that the world itself should be tachtenim. Hitaka does work with the world, but he's not there that the world should hear the kavanah. He's not there that the people in the street should scream in Amavad. He's there to fulfill his tafkid in the world. His tafkid in the world is to make a dir b'tachtenim. And Hitaka does that. But it's not negeh as yen is all shine. It's not negeh that the other person, he himself should hear likus. It's negeh, it's limited to how much his mitzvahs feels his kavanah is. Like the Rebbe brings a dogma of Avos Yisrael, that a yid could go and be mekarav another yid of Torah mitzvahs. But not because he cares about the other yid, but because he has a chiyuv of v'chet cheches hamisachah. So therefore, he has to tell off the other yid. But it's not the gate that the other yid himself should understand the lakos. It's not the gate that the other yid himself should do Torah mitzvahs. What's the gate is that he has a chiyuv of v'chet cheches hamisachah, and the rechamele, he has to tell off the other yid. And that's avodah of tachtenim. What do you mean tachtenim? He's being put on the world. How can you have a mitzvah that a person is doing the kavanah of dirib tachtenim? On the other hand, it's limited to his mitzvahs. What does that mean? So the Rebbe says in R42, that if there's no chibur of Alionim ותחתונים, if there's no chibur of the kavana Alionim with your mitzias, you're only able to tap into Likkutei based on your mitzias. Even though there's a kavana of dir ותחתונים. But the person, as a mitzias, doesn't look at the kavana as the Eibishter's kavana. He looks at what the Eibishter wants from him. And then Echram is Makayim there. The Eibishter wants him to make a dir ותחתונים. But that's all where that starts from his mitzias. And when he fills out the kavanah, it's until how much his mitzias, how much the kavanah is to get his mitzias. Like I see by Noach Taka told the people off to do tshuva. And they didn't listen. And he didn't daven for them. Because he didn't have a connection to them gufa. Yeah, they were a part of his life. However much it's neget his mitzias, that's how much he's going to have connection to them. As opposed to after Matan Torah and the Aved Avram was the Chadish that a Yid is able to connect to a dark Likkutei that's higher than his mitzias. Not his understanding of Likkutei doesn't connect to doesn't start from his mitzias as a nivra. He's able to connect the kavanah l'yenim to atzmei. Not the way it's shaykh to his mitzias. The Dugma Chassidus brings down that you have ratzin and bala ratzin. You have Torah mitzvahs are shaykh the way the Eibishter ratzin really nimshach, which means when a person becoming Torah mitzvahs, it's the way the Eibishter brought himself down kaviyachal that a Yid should be negeh. And we need the connection to the Eibishter only through Torah mitzvahs. He's limited to his mitzvahs and the Likkutei which are shaykh to his mitzvahs. As opposed to connect to the Bala Ratzin when it comes to the Shani Mekippur. And a person is able to connect to Yechidush B'Nefesh and do tshuva on his Avedas. Where does such a tnuah come from? It comes from that a person has a kech to connect to Dagba Likkutei which is higher than his mitzvahs. So you have even that the ותחתונים is a mission that's given to a specific person, and he fulfills it however much as to get to him. What's an egea that the Welt will shrine? What's an egea that someone in the street should also have the kavan? Like you see by Peil. You have a lot of Yidden do Torah mitzvahs, but it's not an egea that another Yid should do Torah mitzvahs. So number one, forget about that, it's not obviously so. But if a Yid be'etzem cares about Likkutei, it's an egea that the whole Welt shall share Likkutei. If it's emes, then everyone has to scream that it's emes. And that was the chisarna of the Aved of Noach. Noach didn't care that Yenah will shrine. Noach didn't care that the world should have a connection to the Kavanah Aliyena. Noach was only able to connect to the Kavanah Aliyena how it was connected to his mitzvahs, so it was connected to his being. And therefore it was limited. Noach mikatne amanoya. And he didn't save the Deramab. He tried to tell them off, because that was his chiyuv. But he didn't have an effect on them, because he didn't care about them ultimate mitzvahs b'fnei atzmei. Talking about the Aved of Avraham Avinu, Avraham Avinu was machadish that the whole world should scream the Eibishter's presence. Atikra v'yikra v'yakri, he made that the whole world should have a connection to the Eibishter. On the other hand, Avraham Avinu's Aveda was only a Chana to Matan Torah. Because even Avraham Avinu's Aveda, that the whole world should have a connection to the Eibishter, was all that he should pick up the matzav of the world and he should serve the Eibishter. And also, if he didn't feel that the person was able to be elevated to serve the Eibishter, Avraham Avinu didn't have a shaykhs to him. Because Avraham Avinu was only a chana to Matan Torah, he wasn't the chiddush Matan Torah itself. And that's why when Avraham Avinu davened for Sodom, he davened that the Rishon should be saved, not in their merit, but in the merit of the tzaddikim. Because at the end of the day, the only connection the world as a tachton was able to have to Alionim, to Elmas Alionim and Kedusha, was that the tachton has to change. He can't stay a tachton. He can't stay a tachton and still be connected to Likkutei, because there was only a chana to Matan Torah. And therefore, the people of Sodom should be saved, but on the merit and the schos of the tzaddikim. It all came Matan Torah. Matan Torah was machadish that a Yid out a tachton, a Yid in his mitzias has a connection to Likkutei. And that's why when a Yid goes to Makarim another Yid, after Matan Torah, it's true of the Haftar Echa Kamecha to help the Yid in his matziv. Not that he should elevate him and kulei hai v'olai, bring him closer to Torah mitzvahs. Obviously, the goal is eventually to come closer to Torah mitzvahs. But mitzad ava atzmis, in his matzav where he is now, he needs help now. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu davened for Yidden after Matan Torah, for the Esa Egel. Moshe Rabbeinu was Mesa Nefesh, that the Eibishter should save them the way they are now, even though they did Avedas. And if not, Moshe Rabbeinu said that they should take his name out of the Sefer Torah. Because after Matan Torah was Machadish, that a Yid al Tachten in the lowest Metzias that he still has a connection to Likkutei. So that's the end of the first Sikha in the booklet. So the main Chiddush we saw in the Sikha was that usually Chassidus explained the obvious didn't have a connection to Matan Torah. The obvious the Aveda was only in Elim Saruchni. Over here, the Sikha explains that the obvious started already a preparation for Chibur Alionim ותחתונים in their Aveda. And through understanding what the obvious Hachana was, we can understand what the Chiddush of Matan Torah itself is regarding Chibur Alionim ותחתונים.